everyone, totalwar here, and in today's video we're going to have a discussion around Total War Warhammer 3 having an update problem. As almost in the last 2 years we have been receiving a lot more frequent patches and updates, and all of these patches and updates, regardless of their scope, whether they are very small patches or meaty DLCs, have one thing in common, and that is introducing tons of new bugs, which is a massive issue. Some of these bugs could be visual, some of them could affect the gameplay, some of them could be completely game breaking. Because of the way the code of the Warhammer 3 is at the moment, adding or removing one simple value could cause multitude of issues and new bugs within the game. Warhammer 3 throughout its lifetime has gone through an insane amount of bugs, and every new patch introduces even more bugs. They might fix 100 things, but they would introduce 200 new bugs. Whether small or big, doesn't really matter. In the early access that the content creators usually get, there's usually a lot more bugs, but they get around to fixing most of those bugs for the actual release of the update. But unfortunately, even the final release of every patch for the player base ends up introducing a lot of new bugs, which at times don't even get fixed for weeks or even months, which is a really frustrating thing. So let's talk about Warhammer 3 and where this problem started and how it's been going so far into this latest update. So Warhammer 3 was initially released back in the beginning of 2022, and it was an absolute mess in the beginning, and up until the Immortal Empire release on September of 2022, they released a couple of small updates to fix some of the existing issues and bugs, but nothing major really. But then Immortal Empires came with the Champions of Chaos, and they did make the game a lot more enjoyable to play. Obviously, it also introduced a lot of new issues in the Immortal Empires map, which was now the combination of Warhammer 1 and 2, which was Mortal Empires, and Warhammer 3's map, the biggest map in the history of Total War, with the most amount of factions in the history of Total War as well. And they would release monthly or maybe like bi-monthly patches to fix some of the issues, which was pretty standard for back in the day. But it wasn't until the debacle of Shadows of Change back in November 2023 that the behavior and attitude of CA started to shift because of all of the backlash that people have been giving them. The first and most important thing was more frequent hotfixes and patches, which was aiming at fixing the game and making the game feel a lot more better, more playable, having a better flow, and being less annoying and having less bugs. And they did fix tons of bugs, and there's no denying that. But unfortunately, at the same time, they added tons of new bugs. Again, they have their positive side, which is adding more content and fixing a lot more issues a lot more frequently. But also the downside of that is with every one of these good things comes an addition of a lot of new bugs and a lot of new inconveniences that you're going to experience in your campaigns. One of the worst bugs that was added in Warhammer 3 was the inactive AI that we've had it for at least a year and a half or 2 years, until a couple months ago where they fixed it with the introduction of the first proving grounds, which they allowed us to test this out in a beta format. So if it had any problems or if it were adding more problems to the game, they could just not release it as an actual patch and just keep it as a beta, which was an amazing idea in my opinion. They got a lot of feedbacks from a lot of people. That was awesome to see, because before that, in order to tackle this inactive AI, I was using mods to make the AI a little bit more intelligent in how they recruit units, how they move units around, how they develop their empire and build up their cities, which was honestly frustrating because mods can obviously affect your gameplay, especially if you're not running a high-end PC. But as I mentioned, after the proving grounds, which was a success, they rolled that out as an active patch for the game. Factions were looking the best they ever looked in Warhammer 3's lifecycle. They were playing the game somewhat intelligently, building their empires better, recruiting better units, and somewhat challenging the player. Of course, they're never gonna be as good as actual players that are good at the game. The coding of this game is an absolute mess because they've been introducing new things for almost 9 years on the back of the initial code that they had written for this game back in 2000, maybe 14, 15, who knows, when they started writing the code for this game initially. As many of you guys have heard, changing one simple thing could affect 10 different features that don't have to do anything with that one thing that was fixed, such as them fixing the AI's behavior and then breaking the AI at the same time. Because the inactive AI before, it would recruit units, but it would sit on its capital or other cities. But the newer updates have introduced this inactive AI that doesn't even recruit units to begin with and is at the same time completely inactive. As I mentioned, AI factions being inactive has been in the game for a really long time now, but it was initially introduced in Warhammer 3's lifecycle, and they did fix it in the first proving grounds by changing some values. I'm not exactly sure about the technical aspect of it, but they fixed it for the majority of factions, which was a really great thing to see. But unfortunately, in the latest patch, they have broken the AI again for the Lizardman and the Tomb King major factions only. So the minor factions are actually not affected by this. They behave normally as they recruit, expand, and fight and die like every other faction. I've been hearing a lot of talk about the Beastmen AI, that they are also inactive on the campaign map, but I believe they have actually been toned down intentionally to be less of a nuisance in your campaigns, because if AI for the Beastmen is actually working as intended, it's gonna make your lives a living hell in your campaign. Some people, like myself, are a big fan of that. For majority of people, I believe that's just gonna be super annoying, and that could also sometimes end your campaigns prematurely. So before me, I have a Lizardman campaign that I started with the release of update 6.3. So I started as Oxyotl, and I was actually looking at the behavior of other major Lizardman factions around me. So Tehenoin, what he did was he attacked and captured kayaks, completed his province, and just sat there, and he didn't recruit a single unit. I shit you not even a single unit that he actually didn't recruit, which was ridiculous to me. I was like, okay, something is wrong over here. I just put that off as AI being stupid, as always. Skrulk declared war at him, attacked his major settlement, captured it, and thankfully I could actually confederate him before he got wiped out by Skrulk. Itza was even worse than Tehenoin. He was just sitting on Itza the whole campaign without recruiting a single unit. He did not even attack Zotl or Quetzal, which are the minor settlements of the Nurgle faction he starts at war with. And I had to actually start selling him settlements up over here for his AI to actually activate. So the problem that we have over here, it seems like the major Lizardman factions start in a dormant form, and somehow they can be activated into performing normally like every other faction. As you can see, I gifted it's a couple of settlements up over here after I confederated the minor Lizardman faction, and that somehow actually activated their AI, and now they're going after enemies and trying to fight them. And also they have started recruiting units as well, which is looking kind of bright. Tlaqua was wiped out off the face of the earth. He was suffering from the same exact issue, and that's, I believe, the main reason that Vorzag is just steamrolling in the Southlands over every one of his enemies, because he goes to war with Tlaqua, which doesn't actually do anything the whole campaign and just steamrolls over them, and that allows them to steamroll over everyone else in the vicinity. Although in this campaign he was unlucky enough for the Order factions to come out on top in the northern regions and stop its expansion. Krokgar was the other Lizardman faction that I was unfortunate enough to see what exactly happened to him. Initially, Krokgar actually attacked this major settlement and captured it, and yet completed his province in Teotihuacan, but from then he just sat there, didn't recruit a single unit, and he was just wiped out by the dwarves, and I couldn't even save him, unfortunately. So these were the four major Lizardman faction that I could analyze their behavior throughout this campaign, and their behaviors is unfortunately almost exactly the same. They're almost always inactive and in a dormant form, but they can be awakened through some random actions, such as you gifting them settlements or you fighting a battle alongside them. I've heard the Tomb Kings have the exact same issue, and they don't even recruit units, and they get wiped out off the face of the earth in the first 20 turns. So why is this a problem? If you're playing somewhere in the Southlands, Deserts of Araby, the Southern Chaos Waste, Lostria, Althwan, the Bleak Coast, and even Cathay, this could essentially affect your gameplay in negative ways. Let's take Oxyotl for example. If he's not attacking his initial enemies in this direction and then finally face off Kairos at this location, that's gonna give free range to Kairos to the Southern Wastelands, the Southlands. He's gonna be an absolute menace. Tlaqua getting wiped from the face of the earth by Vorzag every single game, that guarantees the fact that you're always going to face a Vorzag and never the Lizardman from the south of yourself if you're in the Desert of Araby. Gorak and Tehenoin getting wiped every single campaign by the Skulltaker, Pestilence, or the Dark Elves is not a fun gameplay. Their AI is not even putting up a fight, and that means you're always going to face the same enemies in Clan Pestilence, Kairos, or Vorzag in these parts of the world. And this is a big reason why this issue is actually a game-breaking one to a point. When playing as the Lizardman factions, it's almost guaranteed you're going to miss out on confederating affecting some of the Lizardmen legendary lords and factions, since the outcome of their wars with their enemies are not randomly decided anymore, and they're predestined to lose because of their inactive AIs. If you want to have fun playing Warhammer 3 in 6.3, you gotta avoid these regions because you're always going to be fighting the same exact enemies. Creative Assembly has already announced that they're going to release a hotfix targeting unit recruitment issues that they've been having with the Tomb Kings, Lizardmen, and some other factions next week. So hopefully that is going to resolve so many of our issues that we have at the moment with the game. But who knows if that would fix all of the problems and wouldn't add any other additional bugs and issues into the game. One of these bugs that was really annoying and frustrating and made the game kind of unplayable for some of the units was the bug for the missile units, mainly the archers or crossbows that have to arc their shots. A couple months ago I was playing the Wood Elves and I noticed that my archers are just not using their ammo and are not shooting at the enemy. I don't exactly remember what patch this was, but missile units, except the guns, were completely broken. Previously, my missile units in the span of 1 minute could have shot anywhere between 5 to 6 shots, but in that update they were shooting 1 to 2 shots in a single minute, which was ridiculous, and it made my Wood Elf campaign completely unplayable. Same deal with the High Elves and some of the other races that rely heavily on archers or crossbows. Obviously the workaround was just not using any missile units and just using melee units, which is boring. If I want to only use melee units, I'm gonna play Khorne. There's another really frustrating bug that has been in the game ever since the start of the Warhammer 3, and that is the audio bug. That part of the audio of the game gets bugged out and you have to restart the game for it to be fixed. I initially thought this was only my computer having this issue, but I've heard it from multiple other people on my streams mentioning they have the same exact issue. Another such a bug was Nakai not being able to recruit Kroxigors, which many people mention all the time for maybe more than half a year, which was insanely stupid because Nakai is a DLC faction and Kroxigors I believe are also DLC units. A modder fixed that in a single day and CA took 6 to 8 months to fix it, which was unfortunate. And there's a lot of other bugs such as this one, which took CA months to fix it. And there was also bugs that took CA maybe a week, even couple days to fix. There's another major bug that I've been experiencing since the beginning of Warhammer 3. This is not a new addition to the game because of the new updates. So when two single entities are fighting each other and one starts running away, the one that is chasing after the other one is always going to have trouble landing a hit on that fleeing unit. The attacking entity could charge toward the enemy, either completely miss them or actually hit them but don't technically land a hit and damage the enemy. Then there's also this other bug when overcrowding the enemy when it's fleeing is not going to actually damage the enemy. Let's say you have 5 to 10 units on a single enemy unit while it's fleeing, but your units are going to have a really hard time actually landing a hit and damaging the enemies. So all of these bugs have made a lot of people become frustrated with the game, and they're gonna just abandon the game or become apathetic toward it, so they're not gonna care if there's new DLC, new updates. These updates could be amazing. They could introduce minimal amount of bugs, insane amount of new mechanics, new things to the game, but unfortunately the damage could already be done to the trust of many consumers of Warhammer 3. Because for the most part, in many people's eyes, CA has neglected the needs of community for the last 3 years and a half, and they haven't updated the game properly, or they haven't tested the updates properly, and they have released broken updates, which takes away from the amazing experience you could potentially get from the game. Because this game has so much potential, it has so much gameplay to offer. You could have played this game for 3,000-4,000 hours and there's still new things that you could encounter within this game and still be surprised. And that's just the beauty of Warhammer 3. But unfortunately, it's not at the greatest state. Don't get me wrong here, I'm not saying more frequent updates are a detriment to the game. All I'm saying that these updates need more testing before they go onto the live patch. Either release more beta patches and get more feedback and actually act on these feedbacks by fixing the issues without introducing more issues into the game. It might be an impossible task for CA, I have no idea, I'm not a coder, but it would definitely result in a better, more polished game at the end of the day. But let's talk about the positives of the Warhammer 3 updates with more frequent patches. They have added a lot of new content, they have made the flow of the game a lot more better. Obviously, you're not gonna play to mid or late game that often still, and that problem still exists within the game, as there is literally no end game for 90% of the people, because they never get to it because the game gets boring and you just steamroll over your enemies if you know what you're doing by turn 30 to 50. But again, that's a problem for another day. There's a lot of newer content that was added to the game that we didn't have anything similar back in the day to these type of things, such as the deeps mechanic for the dwarves, the unusual locations. So far they have added a total of 40 unusual locations, which was a great addition to the game. The rework of items, the rework of traits, they reworked the cult system. We've also had the addition of the Nemesis Crown, which is an extremely powerful item of power similar to the Sword of Cain. The rework of different races, which are not tied to the DLC, so you're gonna get these reworks for completely free. But the thing is, we used to get race reworks even back in Warhammer 2, but they weren't as complete and complex as Warhammer 3 for at least some of the races. So for the races that had major race updates in Warhammer 3 are the Warriors of Chaos, Empire, Nurgle, Dwarves, Kislev, and Cathay, Zinch, Greenskins, Ogre Kingdoms, and Khorne had minor reworks in my opinion. They call them reworks, but they're not anything more than minor updates. Addition of a more complex system for the Mercenary Ogre contract, which in my opinion is not complex enough. And also have a video on how I think we can fix the Mercenary contract to be even better. It's on the screen, you can click on it and watch it later and see if you like my ideas about how we can fix these Mercenary Ogre contracts to be even more engaging to interact with and have a better experience playing as the ogres. So this is the situation, unfortunately. Total War having an update problem and every update introducing more annoying bugs into the game. I have to admit the game is obviously at a much better state than it initially was when it was released, or even at the release of the Immortal Empires. When you compare the game, flow of the game is a lot more better. There's a lot more new mechanics and new additions to the game that makes the game a lot more replayable. The game still does have an issue of the mid to late game and not being engaging enough or keeping you interested enough to continue your campaigns. The game still feels really fun only in the beginning of the campaign, and as your playthrough progresses, it's gonna become less and less engaging. But as the spaghetti code for the Warhammer 3 goes, fixing bugs is also going to introduce new bugs, and we either have to make our peace with it or we have to demand a better job from CA. As I understand, they have other projects at hand and Warhammer 3 is not the priority anymore, and that is unfortunate to hear, but people are still interested in this game and are willing to spend money on it if and only if there's good content coming up and also the state of the game getting gradually better as the time goes on. As you guys know, CA are not saints. They're an okay company. They're willing to listen to their audience at times and up their game and fix more issues, test their updates better so they don't release them at a broken state. It seems that they always need this pressure from the community to do well, and if the pressure is not there, they're just gonna do a mediocre job, and that is a really unfortunate thing that we've been experiencing with this company. At the end of the day, it comes down to the priority list of CA. See, they need to first identify these issues and then not only get around fixing these issues, but also fixing them in a way that doesn't make other issues to occur or older issues to resurface, which is a big task. It could take 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, or maybe even more sometimes. At times it is understandable, but at some point it's just gonna become not acceptable when it's a reoccurring issue that happens almost every update. If there's a lot of discussion going around these bugs, to save face and bring back some goodwill with the people, they fix them immediately after the day, after the week, after 2 weeks, whatever. Some bugs are obviously not as easy to fix, or they just don't have priority to fix them immediately, and that is really unfortunate. Again, these are all my opinion. If you don't agree or agree with me, let me know in the comments down below. Let's have a positive discussion on what you guys think could be a good solution to tackling this issue for CA, or on our part. It's mainly on CA's part, to be fair, and hopefully if this video gets enough traction, CA would see this and would understand this is a concern within the community. I'm just but one voice within the hundreds of thousands that is concerned about the state of the updates that add insane amount of value to the game, but also take away from the experience by adding new problems to the game. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Drop a like and subscribe for more Warhammer 3 and Total War content. This is PZA Total War, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.